Question number 41 on the reading portion of College Board's Test 3. How would the authors of passage 1 most likely respond to the points made in the final paragraph of passage 2? So what is the final paragraph of passage 2? Let's first realize what Mary Wollstonecraft is saying. So passage 2, Mary Wollstonecraft, in this style, argue tyrants of every denomination from the weak king to the weak father. They are all eager to crush reason, yet always assert that they usurp its throne only to be useful. Do you not act in a similar part when you force all women, by denying them civil and political rights, to remain immured in their families, groping in the dark? So she literally says here, it's a direct response to Talleyrand, remember, from the blurb, that vindication was in response to Talleyrand. She's saying, don't you act the same way that tyrants and weak kings do when they just wave their hands and say, this is how it's going to be. This is just the way that you do it. When all the while you're denying women their civil and political rights in hopes that they remain unenlightened, kind of grabbing in the dark, hoping, to grab onto something. So how would author passage 1 respond to what Mary Wollstonecraft says about this? Wouldn't Talleyrand say that, okay, yeah, you might be poetic in your way of categorizing this argument, but isn't it not the general happiness that should be considered? Shouldn't we keep the primary destinies of men and women, men do one thing, women do another thing, and don't change that balance of power? Because what does Talleyrand say? Any other ambition, right, any other thing other than to separate the sexes would be a reversal of our primary destinies, and it will never be in women's interest to change the assignment they have received. So it seems like Mary Wollstonecraft wants to change that assignment, and Talleyrand's like, we shouldn't. Nonetheless, without getting too detailed, again, that's a very detailed answer, just ask yourself, very broadly speaking, sometimes I like to ask that, do you think Talleyrand would agree or disagree with this statement? Disagree. She's saying that, she's directly attacking Talleyrand, saying he's just like a despot and he's just like a tyrant, and that he's denying women civil and political rights. And what would Talleyrand say? No, I'm not really. That's not, it's supposed to be like that. So he's going to disagree with her. So how would the authors of passage 1 most likely respond to this? They would disagree with it. They'd be like, no, we don't want to do that. Women are not naturally suited for the exercise of civil and political rights. Maybe he says that, because doesn't he say, like, women are, line 25, is it not apparent that their delicate constitutions, their peaceful inclinations, and their many duties of motherhood set them apart from strenuous habits and onerous duties, and summon them to gentle occupations and the cares of the home? So isn't that exactly what Talleyrand believes? Women are not naturally suited to have civil and political rights. Maybe. B, men and women possess similar degrees of reasoning ability. We don't know that. Talleyrand, we don't know if he believes that. He never says that men and women have the same reasoning abilities. Wollstonecraft says that. She says it several times, that it's like, isn't it not fair that if men can think of things themselves, women should also think? That's assuming that men and women can have equal cognitive ability. Talleyrand never says anything about whether men and women have equal cognitive ability, though we might infer or imply that he thinks they don't. I don't know. I'm just based on what he believes. But does he say that? Is that what he's going to say? Men and women possess similar degrees of reasoning ability? No, he's not. He's not going to be like, yeah, I agree with you there. Men and women are very equal in terms of their mental horsepower. And what does that have anything to do with this last paragraph about calling Talleyrand a despot and calling him a weak king and telling him that he's denying women civil and political rights? What does that have to do with oh yeah, now he's going to respond like, well, men and women do possess the same reasoning ability. He never says that. And why would that be a logical response to that attack at the end? Well, let's see. Women do not need to remain confined to their traditional family duties. That's what Wollstonecraft believes. Maybe. Maybe she doesn't, actually. Maybe that was my inference. But realize how C is like getting you really confused. Would Talleyrand from passage 1 say, after reading Wollstonecraft's conclusion that he's a tyrant and he's a despot and he's denying people civil and political rights, is Talleyrand now going to say, women do not need to remain confined to their traditional duties? No, he says women are, mothers, and that they do things in the house because they're gentle occupations. They're not strenuous and they're not onerous. That's what he says. So he's not going to just make an about face at the end of the piece and be like, yeah, you know what? Women actually don't need to do the traditional things that they've always done. That's not what Talleyrand's going to say. He's not going to agree with Wollstonecraft. This is it's like mental twister. You have to make sure that everything is in a row and aligned, and that you don't get things tangled up and confused. They're trying to confuse passage 1, passage 2. What does Talleyrand believe? What does Wollstonecraft believe? And then get you to pick an answer because you're like, I think someone said that, and your brain short circuits. Don't do that. Be logical and organized, and repeat things over and over in your head if you don't understand it. That's what I do. How would the authors of passage 1 most likely respond to the points made in the final paragraph of passage 2? So how would Talleyrand respond? The principles of natural law should not be invoked when considering gender roles. He never talked about natural law should not be invoked. If anything, he says it should be invoked. Because doesn't he say that any other ambition, lines 17, would be a reversal, or 18, of our primary destinies, and it will never be in women's interest to change the assignment they've received. So he loves invoking natural law. This is just the way it is. This is the way the society works, right? He brings that up many, many times. At the end, he's like, the whole idea of society being harmonious, isn't it obvious that the two sexes were distinct, that they were separated in the way that it happened? So he actually would bring up natural law. So I don't think that he would respond by saying, well, we shouldn't bring up natural law, should not be invoked. I think Wollstonecraft should agree with that as well. Wollstonecraft should say, like, yeah, whatever you think natural law, or whatever nature says, has nothing to do with this argument at hand. Again, another answer choice that's trying to be confusing. They're trying to make us pick D very similar to C, when we realize that's like not what Talleyrand believes in. Talleyrand is a pretty hard liner in saying women should just follow orders and do what they've always done, because that makes the general happiness of the people, that satisfies the general happiness of the people. How the author of passage 1 most likely respond to the point made in the final paragraph? Talleyrand would disagree with this. He would say, what? A, women are not naturally suited for the exercise of civil and political rights. A, he says that over and over again. Women are in the house, they take care of kids, they don't have to do the strenuous habits and onerous duties that I guess we can imply exist in government. This is the way that society works. This is the way that nature has allowed itself to play out. So how would Talleyrand, what would Talleyrand say about Wollstonecraft's argument at the end of saying that he is denying civil and political rights, that he's a weak king and so on? He's like, well, you're wrong. Like, we shouldn't let women be educated. We shouldn't let them make their own decisions. This is just how society is. Women are not naturally suited for the exercise of civil and political rights. Tough passage. The answer to 41 is going to be A.